You said no. You asked for space. You told her you needed time to think. And somehow, by the end of the conversation, you were apologizing for having the boundary at all. You're so cold. Why do you always shut me out? If you love me, you wouldn't need this. You walked away feeling like you'd done something wrong, like asking for what you needed was selfish, like having a limit made you a bad partner. So the next time you felt that need, you did not voice it. You pushed through. You told yourself a good man does not make demands, a good man accommodates. And slowly, without noticing, you stopped knowing where you ended and she began. Your limits became suggestions. Your needs became negotiable. Your no became something you had to justify, defend, and eventually abandon altogether. Meanwhile, her boundaries remain sacred. Her space was honored. Her preferences are requirements. And if you question that asymmetry, you were told you were keeping score, being petty, not understanding how relationships work. Today's video is about a tactic that erases your sense of self, which is invalidating boundaries. We'll look at how this tactic works and why it is so effective. Then we'll walk through 4 ways it operates. Soft push, hard push, where minor dismissals train you to stop resisting before the major violation arrives. Boundary flips, where your attempt to set a limit is reframed as though it's cruelty or control. Uneven standards, where her boundaries are gospel and yours are negotiable. And consent disregard, where your no is treated as an obstacle to be overcome rather than a limit to be honored. We'll close, as we normally do, with tools to protect your limits when the person closest to you treats them as problems to be solved. For those of you who are new here, this is Stand Again, a lived experience platform for male victims of family violence. Abuse is not limited to one gender, but this channel focuses on the male perspective because it is so often dismissed or misunderstood. If this content helps you, please like, hype, subscribe, and add the word Stand Again into the chat. Those 2 words might just help a victim of family violence find theirs. Invalidating boundaries is a tactic that erodes your right to have limits. It teaches you that your needs are obstacles, that your preferences are optional, that your no requires justification that will never ever be sufficient. The abuser does not have to physically force past your boundaries. She just has to make holding them so costly to you, so exhausting, so laden with punishment that you eventually stop trying. This tactic works through conditioning and reactive training. Every time you set a limit, it's dismissed, mocked, or turned against you. Your brain logs the lesson. Boundary leads to pain. Assert yourself, and there will be conflict. Ask for what you need, and you will be punished for asking. After enough repetitions of this, you stop setting boundaries in the moment. You start abandoning them before they have fully formed. The resistance moves inside, and you end up policing yourself. This tactic is particularly effective because of how men are taught to understand their own limits. Men are trained to see tolerating discomfort as strength, enduring without complaint is masculine. Pushing through is what a good man does. So when his boundaries are crossed, he doesn't see it as a violation at first. He sees a test of character. The more he can tolerate, the more he proves he's a good partner, a strong man, someone who can handle things. The violation becomes an opportunity to demonstrate his worth. There's also a deeper problem here. Men are sometimes taught that holding a boundary is sometimes a demonstration of not being in love, that setting a limit is actually withholding, that having a need for space or privacy or autonomy means he's failing at intimacy. So when a man says that he needs time alone, it sometimes does not feel like self protection. It feels like he's being a bad partner. The very act of having a limit carries shame. And your abuser will exploit that shame when she frames your boundary as coldness, rejection, or even abandonment. Many men don't even know they have boundaries until those boundaries are violated. No one taught them to identify their own limits. No one gave them language for this is where I end and you begin. So when your abuser crosses a line, the man feels wrongness in his body, something tight in his chest, something that wants to pull away, but he can't quite articulate what it is. He doesn't have the words, and without words, he can't defend what he doesn't know how to name. The result is a man who learns to treat his own preferences as optional and her preferences as a requirement in the relationship. His "I would rather not" becomes her "you always do this." His needs are requests that can be denied. Hers are demands that must be met. That asymmetry feels normal to him because he was trained to accept it. He was taught that his comfort is expendable, his peace is secondary, his limits are obstacles to harmony. When your abuser enforces her boundaries and dismisses yours, you don't see the hypocrisy. You see how relationships are meant to work. Let's step through the four distinct patterns of how boundaries are invalidated. Each one does attack your right to have limits, but from a slightly different angle. Type 1 is soft push, hard push. Soft push, hard push is a pattern of escalating violations. It begins with minor dismissals, small overrides that seem harmless in isolation. She forgets something that you asked for. She makes a decision without consulting you. She laughs off a preference that you've expressed. Each instant is too small to fight over, too minor to make a scene about, so you just let it go. The mechanism is a form of conditioning through gradual pressure. Every soft push that goes unchallenged weakens your sense that your boundaries are real. You get used to making these small accommodations. You normalize these overrides. And once that softening has taken hold, the hard push then arrives. The violations become bolder. She walks into private spaces without asking. She speaks on your behalf. She makes commitments for you without consultation. She questions your decisions with authority rather than curiosity. By the time that hard push arrives, though, you've already been trained not to resist. You've learned that your boundaries don't hold. You've internalized the idea that your limits are negotiable. And because each violation built on the last, you can't point to a single moment where everything changed. There's no clear line that she crossed, just a gradual erosion that left you unsure where your limits even were. For men who were taught to pick their battles, who were told not to sweat the small stuff, the soft push is really effective. He lets the minor violations slide because they seem petty to challenge. By the time he recognizes the pattern, he's already questioning whether he has a right to object at all. Pattern 2 is the boundary flip. Boundary flip is when your attempt to set a limit gets turned against you. You might express a need, and suddenly you're the one being accused. You might ask for space, and you're suddenly being accused of abandoning her. You might ask her to lower her voice, and now suddenly you're accused of silencing her. You might even try to protect yourself, and you're being cast as the aggressor. The mechanism inverts the dynamic. Your boundary, which is an act of self protection, gets reframed as an act of harm. She positions herself as the victim of your boundary. She accuses you of being controlling, cold, punishing, and abusive. And because you were trying to protect yourself, because you know your intention was self care, the accusation is quite disorientating. You end up defending yourself instead of maintaining your boundary. The conversation shifts from what you need to what you've done wrong. This pattern is devastating for men who are raised to avoid conflict, who are taught that a good partner compromises, who believe that love means sacrifice. When she tells him his boundary is selfish or controlling, the man doesn't see it as manipulation at first. He sees evidence that maybe he's failing at partnership. The accusation lands in territory that's already tender. The man already wonders if having needs made him a bad partner, and now she's confirming it. The result is a no-win scenario for the man. If he stays silent, his needs are ignored. If he speaks up, he's punished for speaking. Either way, her behavior continues and his voice disappears. He learns that setting a boundary suddenly makes him a villain. So he stops setting boundaries, abandons himself to avoid the accusation that he might be hurting her by setting a boundary in the first place. Pattern 3 is uneven standards. Uneven standards is when boundaries are selectively enforced. She has them, you do not. Her limits are sacred, yours are negotiable. She can demand space, privacy, rest, autonomy, and those demands are treated as legitimate needs. When you ask for the same things, you're met with suspicion, guilt, or even punishment. The mechanism creates a one way system. She gets to protect herself, you do not. Her preferences are requirements that must be honored, yours are requests that can be denied. The rules apply to you and not to her. Any attempt to point out that inconsistency is met with deflection, accusation, or even rage. For men, this asymmetry often feels normal. The cultural script already told men that female comfort matters more than male. Happy wife, happy life is not a joke. It's a framework that positions his needs as expendable, his peace as secondary, his boundaries as obstacles to her happiness. When she enforces her limits and dismisses his, it aligns with what he's already been taught. Happy wife, happy life. He does not see the hypocrisy in that statement. He sees the natural order of a relationship. The training here runs deep. She can ask him not to raise his voice, but she yells whenever she's overwhelmed. She demands time to decompress, but interrupts his solitude without hesitation. She insists her privacy be respected, but monitors his messages and questions his movements. He absorbs these contradictions and makes sense of them by concluding that her needs are simply more valid than his. It's an assumption that was instilled so early, a man doesn't even know it is there. The result is a man who becomes afraid to name what he needs. He scans every conversation to make sure his words will not offend. He minimizes his preferences before expressing them. Meanwhile, she can say or do whatever she wants, and he has to understand, be patient, hold space, make room. His job is to adapt, hers is to be accommodated. And he thought that was love. Type 4 is consent disregard. Consent disregard is when your no is treated as an obstacle to be overcome. Your refusal, your hesitation, your clear statement that you do not want something, none of it stops her. She pushes through. She sulks until you relent. She makes withdrawal so punishing that compliance becomes easier than resistance. The message is clear. Your consent is negotiable. Your limits are inconveniences to be managed. The mechanism is entitlement enforced through pressure. She believes she has a right to your availability, your attention, and your agreement. When you withhold any of those things, she treats it as a violation of her rights rather than an exercise of yours. She might not use force. Instead, she uses guilt, accusations, emotional withdrawal, or even escalation of abuse. She makes the cost of you saying no so high that your yes becomes the only survivable option. This shows up across every domain within the relationship. You say you do not want to talk about something right now, and she demands the conversation anyway. You say you need time before making a decision, and she pressures you until you give an answer. You say you do not want to attend an event, and she guilts you until you go. You ask for a night to yourself, and she makes you pay for it with coldness or accusations. Your stated limits are treated as opening positions in a negotiation she intends to win. It extends to your body and your space. You ask not to be touched during an argument, and she keeps touching you, framing it as comfort while ignoring your distress. You say you are exhausted and you do not want physical intimacy, and she sulks or accuses you of not finding her attractive. You pull away and she follows. Your physical boundaries are treated as rejections of her rather than protections of yourself. For men, this pattern collides with a cultural script that offers no language for male boundary violation. Men are supposed to be available. Men are supposed to want intimacy. Men do not get tired, overwhelmed, or simply not be in the mood. So when his no is ignored, he often cannot name what happened. He feels the wrongness, the sense that something was taken, but the cultural narrative tells him That can't be right. He doubts his own experience. He tells himself it was not a big deal, and the violation goes unnamed, buried under shame that should not be his. Consent is about whether your no is honored when you say it in any domain about anything. If your boundaries have been eroded, these tools are about reconnecting with your right to have limits. The first tool is internal boundary clarity. Before you can protect a boundary, you have to know what it is. Start by identifying your limits privately. Not what she's told you is reasonable, not what you think you're allowed to have, your genuinely actual limits. What do you need to feel safe? What do you need to feel respected? What are the lines that, when crossed, leave you feeling diminished? Write them down. You do not have to share this list with anyone, but having it written gives you something to anchor to when the invalidation starts. It reminds you that your needs are real, even when your abuser is telling you they are not. The second tool is to document the pattern. When boundaries are being invalidated, your memory of what happened becomes unreliable. Your abuser tells you it wasn't a big deal, that you agreed, that you are misremembering. Instead, keep a private record. Note what you asked for, how it was received, and what happened next. This protects your clarity when someone is rewriting reality. External documentation becomes your anchor to what actually occurred. And then the third tool is strategic disengagement. You do not have to defend every boundary in the moment. If asserting yourself leads to abuse, if holding a line triggers escalation, you're allowed to disengage, walk away, end the conversation, refuse to participate in the dynamic. You are not obligated to fight a battle where the rules are rigged against you. Sometimes protecting yourself means removing yourself from the arena entirely. If your boundaries have been dismissed, ridiculed, or turned against you, if you've learned to accommodate rather than assert, if you've started to believe that having limits makes you a bad partner, you need to know your boundaries are not cruelty. They're how you exist as a separate person. They're how you know where you end and someone else begins. And in a healthy relationship, they're honored, not attacked. In healthy love, your no is respected. Your need for space is met with understanding. Your limits are treated as information about who you are, not obstacles to be overcome. Both people get to have boundaries. Both people's limits matter. There's no punishment for asking for what you need. You were taught that tolerating discomfort makes you strong, that accommodation is love, that your needs are secondary. Those lessons served someone else's comfort. You're allowed to have limits. You're allowed to protect them. You're allowed to be a whole person within a relationship. Your boundaries are how you stay intact, and reclaiming them is how you come back to yourself. This is Stand Again, lived experience platform for male survivors of family violence. Please like, comment, and subscribe. Your voice might just help another man find his. If you're looking for one on one support, you can book coaching with a member of the Stand Again team. Simply visit standagain.com.au, where you will also find grounded information on surviving and recovering from family violence as a man. As always, remember that no matter how many times you've been knocked down, you can stand again.